listening to episode 2 of the Coanglers Garage podcast. I'm your host, Matt Meliff, and today we have another longtime and accomplished coangler, Troy Mays, joining us. Troy recently finished third in the BAM Pro-Am at Don Pedro, so we're going to talk about his experience at that derby and all things coangling. Come along for the ride. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Coanglers Garage. Today, we've got Troy Mays on the show. Troy's a very experienced coangler here from the West Coast who had a great finish recently in the Bass Angler Magazine, or BAM Pro-Am, at Don Pedro. And so, Troy, I'd like to welcome you to the show today. Thanks very much for stopping in, and we'd love to hear more about you and maybe a little bit about your coangler journey to start.
Hey, Matt. Yeah, nice to put a face to the voice. I know we've ran into each other a couple of times.
Yep.
And I love the whole concept of the Coanglers Garage. Yeah, my name's Troy Mays. I guess you could say I'm a professional coangler.
Yep.
I've got it pretty dialed in. And I wanted to kind of try to set this up in my garage because I thought that would be cool. Because I've got, my setup out there, but it wasn't working for me. So,
well, maybe another time in the future.
Yeah.
Next time you finish way up there.
So I kind of got it set up here in the living room, which is kind of nice. And as far as Don Pedro, that was I got to get up there and practice with my cousin Antonio Gold. He fishes on the pro side.
Right.
And so it's always a blessing to have a family member. So we're more like brothers, I would say.
Yeah.
And
he got into coangling initially?
No. I believe I was fishing prior to him actually getting in the fish. He was doing a little bit of club tournament stuff, and I would say, I've had a couple boats in my life. I think I sold my last boat. I had an older Ranger boat I had gotten rid of probably 12 years ago. And that was really just, I had to prioritize some things with a plumbing business that I have and stuff like that. So, but, I've done tournaments as far back as, 30, at least 30 years ago or more. Young guy, out there fishing and thinking that I'll make it to the Bassmaster Classic someday.
Yeah. So you got a little bit of experience from the back.
Yeah,
the front of the boat, it sounds like.
Yeah, and I probably, obviously, being probably in my 20s, thought I knew a lot more than I really did. And so I had a little success early, and not a whole lot of success after that.
Mm-hmm.
So then I just loved to fish, and as time went on, I had to kind of prioritize because there's a point early on as a young man, really excited about bass fishing, and I think it can get. For me, it was I kind of got a little obsessed about it.
Yeah.
The whole thing, and so the finances and life and trying to get the puzzle pieces together of how to balance fishing, and so I kind of backed off.
Sure.
And focused a little bit more, and the plumbing business needed my attention, so some more of that, but always involved with fishing one way or another. My old boss at the previous plumbing company I worked at, he was a Bass Pro fisherman. His friends were Bass Pro fishermen. There were groups of us that would go to Mexico and fish Lake Bacharach, Lake Wheaties, stuff like that. And
primarily freshwater rather than salt. Yeah.
Yeah, the alpine lakes they have up there, and it's just pretty amazing.
Yeah, awesome.
So yeah, that kind of thing, just fishing. Love to fish, love to hike around fishing. And, I have a kayak, I've had float tubes, boats, stuff like that. And so, I don't know, probably about 7, maybe 8 years ago, a friend of mine had said, "Hey, why don't you, and I'd done some team tournaments and stuff here and there. And so why don't we go, to Lake Mead and you sign up as a AAA and so, I've probably since that fishing trip, which I really enjoyed, I've probably done 50 or so,
Yeah.
something like that as a co-angler.
Yeah.
And I enjoy fishing as a co-angler. I really like it.
Yeah, I do as well, and I think that's why we're here chatting about it in part.
Yeah,
Was that first one one bass or
yeah,
yeah, okay,
yeah,
cool.
yeah, yeah. I would say probably one bass. I mean, although I know I did a New Maloney's tournament with Wild West bass.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but as far as co-angler, yeah, once I started doing the co-angler stuff, um, it was obviously different from the back of the boat, and I think the first couple tournaments, a big adjustment mentally was that I'm not in control of what we're doing, what's going on, and and then I just made peace with that. But it wasn't a simple transition. It was like, oh, I might want to fish this area, and we're passing an area up, you know, and we might have had a tough day, and and then I realized that the all the boaters, pros, whatever, they're all trying to catch fish. I mean, they're obviously trying hard to put us on fish, to catch fish, that kind of thing. So, I began to put, less fault into the person operating the boat
Yeah,
and
for sure.
kind of made peace with that.
Yeah. And of course, there's sometimes that you're fishing with somebody who maybe thinks about how best to find fish, put people on fish in a little different way than perhaps you might, even if it's on the same water where you have a lot of experience. And there's always opportunities to learn something in those moments, which is great.
Yeah, I mean it's not about me out on the boat, you know. If I can get the time off of work, which is great because sometimes, owning a business, you get busy and you just don't have time. And so if I can find the time to get out there and do it, I kind of feel blessed when I get out there. I love to watch the sunrise on the water, and of course the tournament atmosphere with the whole idea of competing. You've got the national anthem, which is always gets me a little choked
Yep.
up,
Yep. With the
and
sunrise.
it's special. And my best bag of fish is still out there waiting to be got.
Yep.
You know, and so the fishermen, they're all pretty solid folks.
Yep.
And so I've really sort of embraced the whole idea, and it's the mental aspect. I think as you mature from a young guy as to a seasoned fella, like us, life takes on a different meaning. And so that's kind of where I'm at. And so anything like a third place finish at Pedro uh, was just gravy. That's just gravy on the meat and potatoes, because getting out there and competing, and we're in a kind of a tough economy right now. A lot of people, I mean, things are expensive, gas,
Yep.
everything. Eggs, right?
Yep.
You hear a lot about eggs.
Yep.
And
Makes
so,
me want to go get some chickens.
yeah, I had the same thought. Yeah. So, anyway, yeah, that particular tournament was, like I said before, I got to practice a little bit with my cousin, and we were trying a lot of different things, reaction baits, and they're kind of in a pre-spawn, I would say. Um, and there were areas that fish were swimming around, pre-spawn areas, more shallow stuff, coves and flats and what have you. Um, and uh, I I I had to downsize my bait small, like to like a Ned rig type TRD bait or something, and just really sort of dead stick it. And so I had an idea like, okay, I could catch them depending on, if the boat was moving fast, I was going to have trouble
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I wasn't going to be able to catch them.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like I would.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I drew a guy on day one. His name, you've probably heard him, Jigs Ben.
Yeah, for sure. He's from I think, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Jigs Ben. And so, I've seen his name on the leaderboard and I knew he had caught a big bag in the Delta and he'd won a boat with New Gin and stuff. And it's just a good old boy. So we had a great time. I think he's mid 70s and he fishes slow and it was great.
Yeah.
Had a great day fishing. And
Super.
we both had 11 pounds something.
Yeah. Awesome.
And so,
Can I ask a question about, you mentioned the Ned rig? Uh,
yeah.
do you think, and maybe I should mention for our viewers that Troy lives in the Motherlode area, not right on Don Pedro, but not too far away, and I'm sure has a fair amount of experience there and on some other Motherlode lakes that are quite similar in some respects. Um, do you think that was because of the size of the bait that it was more effective for you at that moment, or was it more just about downsizing and being subtle, if you had to guess?
No, if I had to guess, I would say that the fish weren't chasing. They would still feed for sure, but I think even like the bigger ones that were being caught, a few big ones were being caught. I think you just had to put the bait in front of them. Like the swim bait wasn't really happening. It was more whatever, flip a Cinco, a weightless Cinco or something. They kind of wanted to feed or mate, I guess, and they weren't in the bait chasing mode, I don't believe. I don't think a lot of guys were scoping them for sure. That was the day that I had the 15 pounds and he had I think he had like 10 pounds, but it was just one of those lucky things where we were both getting bit. I happened to be getting a little bit better quality and it wasn't because of the bait. It's just lucky. I got lucky, you know?
Yeah, and it sounds like you were in one of those situations where even though the guy at the front of the boat may be targeting individual fish, you're in an area where there's a reasonable group of fish that are spread out, which oftentimes is a great situation for a co-angler. How
Yeah.
many did you end up catching that day, do you think?
Yeah, that day two was really good for me. I bet probably 20, at least 20 fish. Some small ones, several small ones, but I was culling out fish. And, and I was fishing with Greg Kong and just a super nice guy. He was catching them. He just wasn't getting the good ones. And I started culling out fish that were bigger than, my smallest was bigger than his biggest. And so I was hoping he would start getting some because it's always, you want to both catch them. And I have no problem, having the second biggest bag in the boat. That's fine with
Yeah,
me.
totally, totally. So
But
this
he
was,
was around them.
yeah, this was Craig Gong. Yeah, yeah. I fished with him as well. I had a day with him at Clear Lake that did not end so great for me, but like you're saying, totally awesome dude, and I'd love to, fish with him anytime. So he smashed him that day. So some days you get them, some days you don't.
But it doesn't surprise me. He
Yeah,
was in an area, pre-spawn area. In fact, I caught 4.66, which helped me out a lot
yeah,
because I ended up, like I said, with 15 pounds, and he was in the right area. The fish were pre-spawn, but there were fish around, some males and a couple of females, not big ones, but I was happy to have that.
yeah. Sure,
It
sure.
was,
Awesome.
and he's like, "Oh my God, there's another one." I'm like, "I know, you just cast it right over there." One of those things.
Yep. Yep. So day two went well, and that got you in to the final day. And then what place were you sitting in at that point?
Yeah, I was surprised actually. I knew the bite was kind of tough, and I was thinking 11 pounds, 11, 12 pounds a day would get you in the top 10. And but on day one, there were some big bags caught, like 18 pounds on Coangler, 16 pounds, and I was still sitting in 13th place with 11 pounds something. So I thought, okay, so these guys caught them good. I wonder if they can catch them good again. Probably not. Not like that. Not 18, 16, stuff like that. And that was kind of the case. I caught 15 and moved up all the way to second place, which was, I was like, oh my God, this is great. You know, I'm fishing day three, and then you can fish day three. Day three is always a crapshoot because you know that whoever you're getting paired with has been catching them, right? You just don't know how they've been catching them, and you don't know if that's good news or bad news for you, or if this is going to be, a learning experience to figure out how they were catching them, and just be ready with the net, kind of thing. Because that's happened to me several times. I draw one of these top guys on day three, and they're really catching them good, and I'm learning, and that's the way it is. I'm like, okay, I made the top 10. Hopefully, I can put a couple in the box, kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. I have some familiarity with that experience on day three as well, although not as much as you have. But um, the thing is, you learn something no matter what, and that's in part why we're there. So mentally, personally, I think it's really important on those kinds of days to just kind of reset your mind towards, if I get an opportunity, I'm going to try to execute and take advantage of it. If we get into a little flurry in a place where it's
Yeah,
accessible to me, but otherwise, I'm just trying to think about help the dude out in front, be a good net man, and soak up as much knowledge as I can.
yeah, yeah. That's kind of obviously you want to catch them, and being in second place
Yeah,
going into day three, I'm like, I think I was a pound out, but the top 10, we were all pretty stacked right there. So whoever caught them, these 12, 13 pounds or something, I felt like was going to win the tournament. And that was 14 pounds won it. And it's a guy who's been fishing Coangler quite a while, Thaddeus
yeah,
Venison. I,
yeah,
I think, I hope I didn't butcher his name, but
yeah. I think
Thaddeus,
that's
he's
right.
just great guy, and I've seen him in the top 10 before. There's several, amazing co-anglers. We've got a lot of them here. I mean, not to mention the amount of pros that we have on the West Coast that are just phenomenal.
Yep.
And I've drawn lots of them
Yeah,
over
and
the
and I
years.
think some of us travel with people like that, and in Thaddeus's case, I've not met him, but I hope to have an opportunity to speak to him in the not too distant future. And I think he travels with Colby Pearson, who's no slouch, obviously.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think Colby's kind of a household name here in California, if not even further. Back to back wins last year. But yeah, those guys, it's 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 always interesting when you're waiting to see who your pairing is. Who am I going to be paired with, And you're looking at your phone and you're like, oh, okay, wow, I haven't fished with this guy. Or, hey, I drew this guy once before and we're going to be around him. So let's be prepared, kind of thing. But the day three draw, they matched me up with the second place guy from the pro side,
Hmm.
and that was Adam Deacon.
Yeah, and he
And
does a little bit of podcasting himself.
yeah, yeah, he does. Yeah, so I had actually just ran into one of his feeds the way they come up, and it just happened to pop up. And so to see him in person, I was like, hey,
Yeah, it's
I've
pretty cool.
subscribed to your channel there, and so he was on a pretty interesting bite, which he had said, hey, just keep this under wraps because I'm going to be fishing the Super 60, uh, and if this bite holds for me, I could win that tournament. And I said, hey, we're good, buddy. My word's good. I'll and I
Yeah.
understand
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and in general, I maybe I should just say at this point for those who are listening out there, our goal with this podcast series and the Coanglers Garage concept in general is not to share a bunch of nitty gritty details that are that one of the nice things about being a coangler is that you do get to see how these guys who are at the top of their game are catching them, but one thing that comes along with that is a code that I think 99% of us adhere to very well, which is not sharing those details with others in the future. And so in this circumstance there's actually an upcoming tournament where it's particularly important, but in reality that should always generally be the case. And so for those of you out there who are watching this, by the time this gets posted, the results of that Super 60 tournament will be known, and we'll see how you'll know how Adam
Yeah.
Deacon did. I hope he
Yeah.
does well. And
Yeah.
his podcast is great, so check it out.
Yeah. I was really thrilled to get to draw him, and learn something because, he's younger, obviously, and uses his, the technology on his boat. Day one, he had 10 pound, 2 ounce bass on day one, and he ended up 22 pounds. So he also had, a pretty nice 4 fish limit without that fish. And so I had asked him when I joined, how'd you catch that fish? And he kind of, he's like, well, we'll see if I can do it again, and you'll see. And so day two, he had actually weighed in, I think, 9 pounds something, and lost a good one doing the same thing. But I netted a 7.5 pounder for him on day three. And so I said, okay, yeah, I got you. I don't know that I could do it, but you did it, and good for you. And so I knew that it was going to be close. It was pretty close uh, he ended up in second place, but he's pretty excited, hoping his pattern holds up.
Yeah, super. Well, hopefully he'll do well in the Super 60
Yeah.
tournament.
Yeah. I shot him a text, said, good luck.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like to do that.
Yeah, for sure. I'll be tuning in over the next few days to see
Yeah.
how that goes. And
Yeah.
I want to mention while we're here that I think Mark and the crew at BAM are doing a fantastic job. At the time that he picked things up, I think many of us had been fishing the Wild West circuit. In my view, Mark has done a great service by picking up some of the pieces and building what I think is on its way to being a really good circuit here on the West Coast. And I admire people who build something out of nothing from scratch, and he's well on his way to doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Mark had, obviously been around fishing the Wild
Yeah.
West, and with his magazine and everything. And so he was well respected, and the way he does things, former Marine, or
Yeah.
once a Marine, always Marine, however that
Runs a
goes.
tight ship.
Yeah. And so, took on a big risk with, a lot of people with sour taste in their mouth about it. And I think I'd heard him say something last year, if I could just get 60 boats or something, then we can make this work. And he's doing much better than that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of guys who want to fish here on the West Coast. We want to go fishing. I love the pro-am setup where, you fish against other co-anglers. I also like the one bass setup where, like I'm excited to get to fish the Cal Open this year.
Coming up.
And yeah, it's coming up. I was in the garage yesterday tying some stuff up, and but that's a sort of a stress-free. I get to go fishing, get to unplug from work. Blessed to be able to afford to do it, and and go out there and really try to help the guy out. Whoever I draw, that's my goal. Can I put one in the box? And if I finish high up on the board, then that's just, again, a bonus type thing because I I'm just there to have fun. Clear Lake's great. I mean, I think my personal best bag as a co-angler was at Clear Lake, a Wild West event where I finished second place. But on day one, I was leading the tournament. I think I had the big bag and big fish, 26 pounds. So Clear Lake, you love it. And then the next
Yeah.
day, I drew Tony Franceschi. And he's like, oh gosh, you're in first place. I'm around a few, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't have a keeper in the boat till about 2:30. And so like, man, this was fun. This was like going to Disneyland, and now I'm on the House of Horror ride. Now this is fishing. This is
Yeah, for
on
sure.
top of the world one day, and the next day I was headed home. And we pulled into a little spot, and I started throwing my LV 500 around, and ended up getting four in the box in about 20-minute period, and it ended up staying in second place. But that I'll tell you, Tony Franceschi, he's probably one of the nicest, sweetest guy who tried so hard to help us get fish. And he ended up catching a couple big ones, like an 8 and a 7. So he salvaged. He got some kind of check out of the
Yeah.
deal. But what a nice guy. I don't know if you've
That's
ever met him.
I've never drawn him. And I'm sure I'll run into him sooner or later. I've heard a lot of great things about him, and I'm really glad that you mentioned that because one of the things I want to do on the podcast is to try to have people highlight a pro or two who they've fished with in the past who's really gone out of their way to do something for them when they fished as a co-angler that they really didn't need to do that helped them out. And we're not here to have conversations that lead to bashing pros. And for transparency, I would say 19 out of 20 times in the boat, I finished the day thinking I'd love to fish with that guy again. So those sorts of things are very rare experiences, but to the extent that we can highlight positive things that guys have done in the front of the boat that have helped us out and have helped the sport out, I think it's great.
Oh, yeah, yeah. There's a whole list of guys that I've drawn over the years that fall in that category. I mean, up fishing up at the Columbia River, uh, drew some locals up there. Justin
Yeah.
Campbell.
Yeah.
Oh my God, he's just the nicest guy, greatest guy. Put you on him. He's like, hey, I'm going to let you pick one off over here because
Right.
you're doing well. And I'm like, thanks, man. And then a little later, he's like, how's your bag looking? Maybe I'll let you pick another because, he's on him. And
Yeah.
this guy, I had heard he won 9 tournaments in a row up there at one point. And so, and I was told that he was local and when I drew him or that he was really good on that body of water. And, obviously a local and that was great. And I drew him on day 3 and that's the tournament I actually did end up winning one of those up there. I've really enjoyed the Columbia River, the
Yeah.
upper part, the Tri-Cities, and then the Boardman. And so I've been up there 3 times, and twice I made the top 10.
So it agrees with you pretty well.
Yeah, I just love it. I mean, that fishery with those smallmouth and it's just different, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's just amazing.
Yeah. I love it up there. I lived in Seattle for a little while, and while I was there, I didn't get too much fishing done, but I think I was at the tournament that you're talking about where you fished with Justin Campbell. And that was my first time fishing on the Columbia in the Tri-Cities area. And it was a, it was a blast. That tournament didn't turn out as well for me as it did for you. I'm happy that you had that experience. But I fished with a couple great guys, and I'm really looking forward to going back up there again this year. I'm actually going to fish the whole Northwest swing for BAM. So I've never been to Potholes. I've heard a lot of fantastic things about
Yeah.
it, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
And then a month later is the Columbia. What are you thinking with respect to more
Yeah,
events this year?
I'd like to get up to Boardman. I'd love to do potholes too. I heard potholes you just, fish heavy cover, fling your frog way up in there and
Yeah,
have some heavy braid or,
yeah.
ripping them out of there, I guess.
Sounds kind of like the Delta, but more willow trees, kind
Yeah.
of, and obviously
Yeah.
more sand
Yeah.
dunes. But it looks cool.
Yeah, and guys just rave about it.
Yeah,
I've seen a few videos here and there, and yeah, that's I would love to do. I don't think I'm going to be able to make potholes.
yeah,
I would like to do Boardman again, for sure. Especially because I'd like to at least qualify for the TOC. Um, so if I can get one extra tournament, that might they'll take four from that,
yeah. For
from the
maybe for
travelers.
for those who are listening, Troy's referring to the TOC tournament for BAM. There this year there are two divisions. One of them is, for those of us who live in Northern California, there was a tournament at the beginning of the year at Shasta that I think we both fished, and then there's two more tournaments in our neck of the woods. One of them we're talking about now, the Don Pedro tournament, and then there's another one coming up at the Delta, I think at the end of May, or straddling May and June. And then Mark this year has added, I guess it's the Northwest or Pacific Northwest division. So they share the same starting tournament at Shasta, but then anglers, both pro and AMs in the Pacific Northwest, have the opportunity to fish two tournaments at Potholes and on the Columbia River out of Boardman, Oregon. And there's a travelers circuit, where if you fish a total of 4 events from amongst those 5, you can potentially make it to the TOC. So just a little
Yeah,
context, because I think not everybody
yeah,
who listens to this
yeah,
will be familiar with BAM. Hopefully, if
yeah,
we get a few eyeballs.
yeah, yeah. And I think the goal, is you know to try to make the TOC. So if you can't make it with the three tournaments, if you look into the two circuits, and you can, travel either from the Pacific Northwest down here and do one,
Yep.
or vice versa, then they'll take four. So if you get top four in points, and then there's whatever 10 or 12 taken from each division, and so there's a cap on how many can go. So there's a couple ways to get in there, which is great.
Yeah, for sure.
Keep keep taking a swing at it.
Yep. And that tournament will be at Lake Almanor this year, I think in September. I haven't fished Almanor before, but from everything I've read and seen, I think it'll be a good time to be there. So good luck with that, and I'm going to do the best I can in the Pacific Northwest swing to see if I can end up there as well.
Yeah, so you'll get two tournaments in up there, and then two here. The Shasta you
Yeah,
did,
so
and
I was actually going to fish all 5. It lined up well with my schedule, and then unfortunately, because of the golden mussel thing, they had to move the Maloney's tournament to Don Pedro, and I still would have fished it, except it moved a week, and I had a conflict the weekend of the Don Pedro tournament.
yeah,
So
yeah,
that solidified my resolve to fish all the Pacific Northwest ones. And I'm bummed because I love the Motherlode lakes. I would have loved to
yeah,
fish the Pedro tournament.
yeah. So how do you will you drive up to the Columbia River?
Yeah, I will, and I'm actually contemplating, just with the way the schedule worked out, I may visit a friend partway in Oregon and possibly fish a little bit.
Yeah, well, yeah. If you can get that block of time, and
Yeah,
you get one shot at it, so go
yeah,
do it.
yeah. With work and other schedules, I probably don't practice as much at the typical event compared to many coanglers, but there's the occasional one where, like this one that we're talking about, where I think I've got an opportunity. So I'm going to
Yeah.
take full advantage of it.
Yeah. Well, just make sure and follow the channel markers in that
Yeah.
river. That's the thing.
Yep.
It looks like, oh, I'll just go over here and fish. That looks good. And all of a sudden you're on a sandbar or something. The channel markers are a big deal up there.
Yeah.
I kind of
And
learned that.
that and the weather forecast.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That and the weather.
That's no
Yeah, for
joke.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. They almost canceled day 3 last year in the Pro-Am on Boardman because of the
Yeah.
wind.
Yeah.
Gets pretty gnarly. I haven't been up there with the big winds, but I hear that it's
Yeah. I think it, for those of us from down here, I mean, obviously, like you probably spend some time on the Delta. It's not too far away. We can experience some pretty significant wind there, but it's nothing like the Columbia. Just downstream in Hood River, it's one of the major wind sports centers of the entire world. So
yeah
it tells you something about
yeah
that place.
yeah right yeah
So yeah. So we got a little off track there, but it's fun. Can I ask you a couple more questions about
yeah
Pedro?
yeah
And
absolutely.
obviously, share as much or as little as you want to. Um, but I'm curious about, you mentioned in practice for you, a bait or two. As the tournament went on, with respect to finesse versus down baits versus reaction, like what percentage of your fish were caught on those approaches, and was there one or more key baits for you? uh
Yeah, I would always like to throw a little swim bait around and
yeah,
drag a swim bait, throw, and
so like a
try to
smaller
figure.
Kitech, I would have.
Yeah, exactly. And, underspins and I've always got a rip bait tied on because I just love to throw a rip bait. You can, as a co-angler, you can throw a rip bait anywhere, you
Yeah.
know, over here, back here, and just, these fish are there. I don't have the graph to target them, but I know they're there and you can get them sometimes.
Yeah.
But it just wasn't happening.
Okay.
In practice, I think I threw a crankbait for a couple hours. I don't even think I got bumped on it. Didn't even get bumped. So I was really downsizing with the smaller Ned rig and the small, like little Z, the mini Fatty Z. It's a
Yeah.
TRD Fatty Z.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the bigger one, I just wasn't getting bit. And I really wasn't throwing the Cinco much. I just didn't have the patience to be doing that. And then the tournament came around and I stuck with my small baits, like the little
Hmm.
Golby Brian or whatever
Yeah,
I think it's called.
that's the color
Uh,
on the
yeah,
the Z-Man baits. Yeah.
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 And it's one of my confidence baits. And I was catching them on that, and I was catching them on the mini Fatty Z green pumpkin,
Okay.
you know.
Yeah.
And and on day 2, uh, when I had the nicer bag, I decided to start the day off. Well, I caught one decent one late in the day on Friday, day 1 of the tournament, on the full size Fatty Z.
Yeah.
But I hadn't been getting bid on it,
Yeah.
so I wasn't throwing it. I was only getting bid on the small stuff,
Yeah.
dead stick in it,
Yeah.
and so I caught two decent ones late on Friday. I culled, and that helped me get the 11 pounds on the full size Fatty Z,
Yeah.
the scented. I've been
Yeah.
throwing the scented green pumpkin Fatty Z, that
Yeah.
scented one now,
Yeah.
because like I need all the help I can get, right? And so I started day 2 with the full size Fatty Z, and they were eating it on day 2. So I had upsized and started catching bigger and better fish. And I pretty much, I think I want to say I had 3 of them tied on, because as a co-angler, if you break off, and of course, I'm not running braid the leader, any of that stuff. I don't have time to be tying leaders, especially when it's cold. My hands don't work that well
Yeah.
when it's cold. I
So
mean,
it's straight fluoro for you.
hmm
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just put like half a spool on so I can
Yeah.
fish it all weekend. If I
Yeah.
break off, I can tie up real quick.
Yeah.
But typically, if there's a bite that I'm really confident in, have a lot of confidence throwing it, I'll have several of them tied on.
I think it's kind of fun to have these conversations because you realize that, where the similarities are and where the differences are. And, over time, there may be some differences that matter, but also there are probably aspects of this for me and aspects of this for you where probably the confidence aspect of it is maybe more important than the actual color sometimes. Um, I've I fish the Ned rig some from the back of the boat, and for me, the deal color is the one that's like really my confidence color, and the Fatty Z is as well. And I tend to sometimes have two or three of those ready to go, just like you do. However, I tend to do the braid to leader, and I'll it's can get a little pricey, but sometimes I'll do 20 feet of fluoro to braid, and then if I lose a little bit, it decreases the chance I'm gonna have to retie, while I'm on
Yeah,
the water, which is no
yeah,
good because you can't
yeah,
catch fish with a bait that's not wet.
yeah, yeah. Well, fishing Shasta, the last two winters, whether it be the open or BAM, whatever, it's been the weather's been pretty tough up there.
Yeah,
The Shasta Open, the one bass, I think snow and cold, and I just can't use my hands,
yeah,
and it rain and everything, and so it's more about just hunkering down, trying to get bit, and
yeah,
not worry about that the the braid. It like sticks to itself when you're trying to twist it and it's wet. It's just a nightmare. And I'm like, I'll spend the money and buy some good fishing line. I fished with Greg Gutierrez probably like 6 years ago, and he was fishing gamma fluorocarbon line, and he pulled a big fish out of a tree on a drop shot, and he was saying, I had a 6 pound test, and I said, there's no way you're fishing that tree with 6 pound test, and he said, yeah, I am. So I went and bought some of that fishing line, and I've been using it ever since. I've yet to find a discount code for it, but
yeah.
that would be nice.
I'll let you know if I
Um,
run into one somewhere.
so that line, as long as I check my knot and make sure I don't have any frays. Believe it or not, I have not been broken off with that fishing line. And Gammas, feel free to send me some fishing line because I'll plug you all day long.
Speaking of fluoro, one thing that I do I grew up doing a ton of saltwater fishing, and one thing that I've more recently understood a little bit better from that world is the extent to which the actual breaking strengths of fluoro versus what's on the package actually sometimes are so different. Generally, in the 6 pound breaks actually at 9 pound, or something like that aspect. That it really can be hard to know without testing. So it turns out that for you, this has worked great, and it might actually break at a higher strength,
Hmm.
but as long as they're still biting it, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'll definitely upsize my line, at Clear Lake.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I have a couple of spinning reels with 8 pound fluoro, which I think I can handle some fish, but I'll probably have, one for sure, maybe two spinning rods in the boat. And then from there, it's probably the smallest, like 14 pound gamma is, you know, I mean, if you get your bait hung up, I mean, you literally have to pull and stretch and grab it with your glove and twist it to get it out. Like,
Yeah.
so,
And if
uh,
the guy at the front's trying to move the boat at that time, they probably notice that something's a little different.
yeah. So I'm comfortable with that. Throwing 14 pound for some swim baits up there.
Yeah.
That'll work for me.
Yeah. On the the Ned rig colors, the other one, it sounds like maybe Gobi Bryant is one that you use quite a bit. Um, the other one that I like when the water's a little stained is Copper Truce, and I have some confidence with that one, largely from fishing Maloney's actually. And I had a good memory of a 4 pound largemouth in a tournament that was on that color, and so it's kind of stuck with me over the years. Um, but anyway, were there, coming back to the Pedro event, were there any particular key on the water decisions that you made? You talked a little bit about, not fishing the rip bait as much because they weren't eating it, but midway through, was there something else that maybe you haven't mentioned so far that was important for your finish, or was it just kind of you just kept on trucking with your strategy?
Yeah, no, day three was tough. I started kind of fan casting a little swim bait, like a little Kitech and stuff, hoping to get them. And I was, there were several times during the day I was like, how can I just catch a fish? What can I do just to catch a fish? Do I need to tie on a Cinco? Do I need to make a long cast with the Cinco or drag my bait way back there or whatever? And I ended up grinding out a small limit, like a 7 3/4 limit. But it was really just looking for opportunities. If he was fishing an area trying to do his thing, and he turned the boat, and a little area opened up, I would cast there as quick as I could. And then I had on some a heavier. I was fishing the frenzy head, shaky head, but I had a bigger a weedless head, like a 3/8 or a half ounce that my cousin had poured some of those up, and so I was trying to throw a little bit heavier bait just to get down there and have a couple of opportunities to feel it before I had to bring it in. And I got bit. I didn't catch a lot of fish, 6 or 7 fish, five small keepers, and just nothing of quality. But I was fortunate I only dropped one position, so I think that day two bag really,
Yeah,
helped me a lot. Yeah.
sounds like. Hey, just you mentioned frenzy, uh, and it sounds like you may have a similar viewpoint. I'm curious. Have you ever wished frenzy made a 3/8 ounce?
They actually do.
They do.
Yeah, they're just not for sale,
Oh,
apparently, because my cousin
so I
gets
don't
them.
I don't know the right people.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Yeah. I've
Okay.
gotten a hold of a few of them, and they're just lead color for now. I think they'll end up on the market eventually,
Yeah.
because there is a mold for it.
Cool.
But yeah, I
I'd buy a few.
definitely, yeah, I'd get them, and
If they were
I'll
available on the
just,
market, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah, especially like on the windy day where
Yeah.
you want something a little heavier, or it's going to cast a lot better through the wind for me.
Yeah. Or if we're on a place like Shasta and you're sitting over 60 feet of water or something, sometimes a
Yeah, get
quarter
it down
ounce
there.
is not quite optimal.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
yeah, a lot
interesting.
of different shaky heads that you can go upsize on, but the 3/8 frenzy, I've seen it in just straight lead color. So
Yeah.
I'll get out a Sharpie and paint it black and see if it stays for a while. But I do like to bend the hook out just ever so slightly for a little better hook set, just a teeny bit. It just, because the way the bait and the hook line up, just the hook out just ever so slightly.
Yeah, that's a good tip. And can I ask, when you say that, are you thinking more about Elaztech baits? Because I've noticed that same thing actually, and for me personally, it's more with the Elaztech baits. Like if I try to fish a Fatty Z on it, uh, I think
Yeah.
that I've noticed that angle makes a little bit of a difference.
Yeah, I just think the hook penetration, no matter what bait is on
Okay.
it, and then the way the line ties up on the head of the bait, like on a jig, you can drag a jig and then just kind of whip your rod sort of sideways and set the hook. on the shaky heads, I always like to try to do a hook set by lifting up, by flopping that hook up, instead of sort of a side hook set. So I always try to be mindful of my hook set when I'm fishing a shaky head. It does seem to make a difference. And then with that hook bent out a little bit, just to get it, kind of get it in there. And then of course, you know, fishing's easy, right? When they're biting and you're getting them in the boat,
Sure.
because it, I like to joke with my cousin and tell him, fishing is really easy. You throw something, you think they're going to bite. And when they bite it, set the hook and, and hopefully you get them in the boat because that's it, right?
Yep.
And so the hook set
It's
to me
simple,
is,
right?
yeah, right. And then keep the pressure on them because I've definitely learned that the hard way. You always know to keep the pressure on, like just keep the pressure on. Don't let that hook have any slack.
Yep.
And I was fishing a team tournament with my cousin, and he swears we lost one at the boat that would have made a big difference, and I lost him, and he swears that I let the pressure off, and he says you just kind of looked at the fish and stopped with the pressure, and man, that hurts, because losing one like that in a tournament and a fish that was going to make a big difference, that's about as bad as watching somebody kiss your girlfriend.
Yeah.
Yeah, it hurts.
No doubt.
It just hurts.
Yep. Yep.
So
That's
always
funny.
keep the pressure on them, just a
Yeah.
little co-angler. I mean, everybody, you assume
Yeah.
know to keep the pressure on,
Yep.
but those fish, they're shaking their head and everything, and man, that just hurts really bad.
Yep. Yep. Okay.
Never
Good.
leaves you.
Good tip. So you mentioned, baits at this time on on Pedro. Maybe two related questions. One, do you feel like your experience over the years, living in that area made a difference? And the follow up would be for co-anglers fishing future tournaments. You touched on some stuff for Pedro in the spring. If you ended up there in the fall in a tournament or even just fun fishing, how are things different for you in terms of how you would
Yeah,
approach it?
yeah. I think that's a big deal fishing any lake. Um, the seasonal pattern, what trying to pattern the fish, what they're doing, where they're at. Uh, you know, Obviously, if you've got a good graph and you've got a boat, you have better luck finding them.
Yep. Yep. For sure.
Um,
Yeah, I guess
you
I'm
know,
thinking more for, from a co-angler
yeah,
specific perspective. Probably the spring and the fall are the two times that it's most plausible there's going to be a
hmm
tournament there.
hmm
So
Oh
would
yeah,
you would you fish similar baits in the fall? Is that a good starting place from your vantage point?
yeah. I mean, for sure. I mean, I think that those baits always work. They're sort of um, but if you stumble, always, I always want to, keep the fish honest. So I'm always gonna, I prefer to catch fish throwing a crankbait or some kind of reaction bait. That's what I prefer to do. But I've become a pretty decent finesse fisherman as well. So I'm always going to throw that reaction bait in the fall. It's I can throw an A rig from the back, but it's sketchy. Might as well just donate some A rigs because that's typically what's going to happen in a tournament. It's not, some guys will help you out and say, hey, let's get that out of there. But hey, they're trying to catch fish, and I don't blame them. So I also like to, if I'm throwing a reaction bait, trying to see if I can get something to bite because hopefully get a little better fish and move up the leaderboard by doing that. I always like to try to, I get permission to cast up as far as I can on either side of the boat after they've cast. And so I say, hey, do you mind if I hit this spot over here? And sometimes they're like, no, I'm not really into that. And so I'm like, okay. And then my other baits too, I always want to throw a jig, but I'll throw it as far to the front as I can because if I do get hung up, I don't always, I try to stray away from dragging baits behind the boat because
Yeah.
when they get snagged,
Yeah.
you're just going to break them off,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
So, imagine then if you're approaching it that way, and for me, I usually, to be honest, wait for the pro to suggest it, but depending on what they're doing, there are obviously some scenarios where it's highly unlikely that if they're focused, let's say off the starboard bow on whether it's shore or maybe fishing a crankbait, there are some scenarios where being able to cast over their left shoulder, as long as they're cool with it,
Mm-hmm.
can be very important. But I've mostly in that scenario fished like, depending on the context, a Senko or a nail weighted Senko. That way, I imagine if you're fishing a jig that way, you're probably fishing it uphill. Is that right? Um,
Yeah. I mean, yeah, definitely coming along on a
yeah,
point or something and, and he's fishing the point and stuff like that. And you can
yeah,
catch it off to the deeper part and pull
yeah,
it up.
yeah,
Yeah. The opportunities for a co-angler is you're trying to get away with as much as you can without getting in trouble or
yeah, for
have it,
sure. There's and it's interesting that you put it that way. I try not to frame it that way in the discussion with the pro, and I also, I think we both make a point of trying to make sure that when we get out of the boat at the end of the day, the person in the front of the boat thinks we're a person they'd enjoy spending another day with, doing the same thing. Um, but there is a healthy balance between uh, respecting the water that the boaters focused on, helping them have a good day, but yet also being assertive enough that you can take advantage of the modest opportunities that crop
Yeah.
up for you, right?
Yeah. 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 They pop up and typically it's, you do you're trying to do the best you can with what you got and respecting the pro is always the key, in the morning, just kind of keep a low profile, ask a few questions. They've got a game plan. And I get it. I understand. They've practiced. They got all the pressure. They got bigger financial responsibilities, all of it. And here I am. I'm a co-angler with my tackle box and my rods, and you know, I'm just gonna keep a low profile and try to pick off what fish I can. I ask a lot of questions as far as where I can cast,
Okay.
and then we kind of establish that. And then
Yeah.
if later in the day I make a cast and the pro makes a comment like, yeah, no, that wasn't cool. I'm like, okay, so all right, I thought that was cool. And
Yeah.
then she, no, that wasn't cool. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, so I try to find my boundary because I have no problem pushing my boundary. Like I'm not going to cast. I know what I can't do,
Yeah.
but then it may be up to the pro to determine if I cross the line or not. So sometimes I'll let him tell me, and then I'm totally fine with that. I have no problem. Now, if you're telling me that I can't do things that I know I can do,
Yeah. That's a
that's
different
when,
situation.
and that's very rare, but it has happened.
Yeah.
It's happened to me.
Yeah. I think
And
that's happened
tip,
to all of us once or twice, but sometimes
yeah,
those fall into the one time out of 20 experiences.
for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd say, yeah, yeah, five out of 100 or whatever,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Um, so in that scenario where, or the things you're describing there, that like the commonality to me though is, and this goes with a lot of things in fishing, for the pros who are like, ending up trying to figure out what part of a spot they can fish when there's another boat on it. The key is communication. And I mean, we've watched that. I'm sure you've seen that play out a million times. Uh, and likewise, within the boat, the key is communication. Typically, as long as everybody's communicating well, you can work out where the edge
Yeah,
of that
Yeah.
boundary is in the gray zone, right?
Yeah. And, there's, it's a fishing tournament and we all take it serious. Some of us can get really caught up at how serious it really is in our life and our world
Yeah.
right there. That's the whole world, right? Of
Yep.
what's going on. And when, uh, when the competition is, say you're in on the final day and it's not going well, um, I sense that, say it's not going so well for the pro, and so I'll back way off.
Sure.
But when it's going well, everybody's happy,
Yep. Yep. Yep.
you know?
Yep.
So you just play
Yeah.
you got to, use your savvy and stuff. And that's where I think just, maturity comes to play because and I want everybody to catch fish. Um, but, and that's what they're trying to do. If you're not catching fish and the fish aren't biting, it's definitely not, like I said before, it's not because the pro's not trying to put himself on the fish. He's trying hard to catch fish. Trust me, he is
Yeah.
trying very hard.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, maybe one thing that coanglers who are just getting into this may not have experienced yet, but that I think we've both experienced is that I think you and I, from this conversation, it should be obvious that we want the people in the front of the boat to be as successful as possible. And there are times that if it's not obvious that you feel that way, it may hurt your results in the back of the boat. And so if you don't, I tend to sort of naturally express enthusiasm for what's going on in the front of the boat. But for those people out there who might just be getting started in this, and that might not be the way you would react, you might want to think about trying it sometime, because it when everybody's enthusiastic, it just feeds off of itself, and I think oftentimes leads to opportunities, perhaps
Oh
later
yeah.
in the day.
Oh yeah. You get the high fives going and
Yep.
there's nothing like it. I mean, yeah, if your goal is to come and try to help out and be grateful for what you catch, the mindset, but it's like, it's easy to say. When you're in
Yeah.
the moment, it's different, right?
Yeah.
But it's something I think the more you practice, the easier it gets. Um, that's why doing some, if you can afford to take off work and fish a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday tournament and the entry fees and stuff as a AAA and like the one bass stuff. It's you fish that more like a team tournament, and it kind of helps you with your mindset of how to help out. Because my goal in those tournaments is just try to get something in the box. Like I tell them right off the bat, I'm here to help you. I want you to know I want to help you. So you tell me if you see fish swimming over here, so I can get, because I also want to catch fish. I love catching fish,
Yeah.
right? Fishing's
Yeah.
great. Catching's
Yep.
even better.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
And so
I'm,
that's good.
let me ask a question about one bass. You fished a fair number of them. You know, I think it's a great organization. I personally have not fished one bass as much because of my schedule. It's very difficult because of how they start earlier in the week, but I think the format's great. Um, Given that it's in some way, there's more of a team element because it's shared weight as opposed to non-shared weight for those who are listening. I'm curious what fraction of your pros have, when you talk the night before, say, hey, you really should do fish this way, versus this is kind of what I'm seeing, but I want you to fish the thing that you have confidence in. How does that play out in that over
Yeah,
time there?
yeah. Over time, really, it's they have a game plan, 100% of what they're going to do.
Yeah.
Um, and on occasion, like some of the guys have, gotten to know me over the years or whatever, and on occasion they'll say, "Hey, did you have any input?" And if they do, I just try to be, because it's fishing. So I don't want to act like I know what I really don't
Sure.
know.
Yeah.
I might say, oh, I've got a couple of spots or this was working, but for the most part, they know what they're doing, and they're sort of like, hey, here are the baits I have tied on, and here's what we're doing. And then when you get out there on the water and start fishing, it takes on a dynamic. Maybe you're throwing a chatterbait and they're throwing their swim bait or something, and the chatterbait starts to pick up. Next thing you know, the pro's tying on a chatterbait, or vice versa. I've went out there thinking, okay, today I'm going to throw my rip bait a lot because I was really getting some good ones on my rip bait. And next thing you know, I'm busy throwing the LV 500 for most of the day. Um, so I just kind of adapt. And if they think, okay, the guy, he's okay at casting. He's not like I can't skip under
Mhm.
docks and stuff
Mhm.
like that. Um, but I can, do okay on, most of my casting. I can flip and
Sure.
target cast a little
Yeah.
bit. If they think, okay, well, hey, this guy might be able to help me out, then it kind of changes,
Yeah.
because that's my goal, is to help them out, help everything out, make sure the net's not blowing out when we're taking off, make sure I get my life jacket on really quickly. And I always like to give a little extra gas money because I know fuel's expensive.
Yeah.
Used
Yeah.
to be like 40, $50. And now for the last couple of years, I'm like, hey man, here's $100,
Okay.
for
Yeah.
fuel. Like,
Yeah. That'll be a question. Actually, I think it's good to ask everybody. And as I think we hope to be a national thing, not just a West Coast thing. And I think we'll see some interviews in the near future of some folks from other parts of the country where gas prices are a little bit different than what uh,
yeah,
we experience here. And I'm curious to see how that varies or whether it does or doesn't. I'm like you. I tend to err a little bit higher than the numbers that are often
yeah,
quoted as kind of the going
yeah,
rate.
yeah.
But I probably for people just getting into this, the most important thing is just to make sure that you do contribute something meaningful.
Yeah, if you're very scraping by, I think $40 is, um, and sometimes the guy won't take it. Sometimes you don't even go far. You
Yeah,
pull out and you're like, here you are. And the guy's like, yeah,
I've
you
had that
know,
experience as well.
yeah. So either way, I think you still offer, you know, and see what they say. Because I
Yeah.
have a one-time rule. I'm going to offer one time, and that's it.
Okay.
To, it just eliminates the bickering around,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Okay. So we're running, kind of towards the end of this. This has been a great conversation. I did want to, if you've still got a couple minutes, touch on a
Yeah,
couple other points briefly.
sure, sure.
Okay, perfect. So obviously, Troy, you are amongst the coanglers that I know who have a little bit more of a seasoned philosophical view of coangling. I wanted to give you an opportunity. You've touched on a couple elements of that, but are there other things that, like, if you could look back at the 20 something you fishing at, maybe a pro am as a co-angler, are there other things that we haven't touched on that you wish that you knew back then?
Yeah. I mean, right, isn't that the $1 million question in life, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, as in fishing goes, that, fishing's a blessing. You never know how many times you're going to be out on the water. To try to teach a younger me anything would be tough. That's not how I'm built. I got to pull the size 12 out of my, what, and hopefully not too many times. Um, so yeah, no, I mean, I think enjoy it, not take it for granted. And everybody has a different experience in life, hardships or what have you, where you might uh, have a different mindset. But most of us young guys, I would say in general, coming up fishing, it's a lot about us. we're, I'm not much yet, but I'm all I think about, you know, most, especially out there. I want to catch fish. I want to know how I can catch fish, bigger fish, and be competitive and win, which is hard to do. Winning tournaments is hard. Um, so, philosophically speaking, I don't think that you know, it's, you know, it's not rocket science. It's the young guys coming up. They know how to read the graphs. They know how the live scope and stuff works. And you don't see a ton of those guys. I would say fish more as a co-angler and don't move to the front of the boat as quick. Um, because you'd only know what you know until you don't know that you don't know or what, right? Um, so, um,
Yeah, and there's such a difference in terms of the way different guys approach sometimes even the same problem from the front of the boat, that more time in the back of the boat uh, allows you to really, fill up that list of tricks that you have for that time that you do move to the front in the future, for those who are
yeah,
even interested in doing that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The reason I fish as a co-angler because it's my priorities. Mine's about paying off the house. I'm going to retire in less than 2 years, and then let's talk about a boat again. And then go out there and just try to have fun and compete if that's what I wanted. I'd like to do that. I mean, would have loved to be able to have competed more than I have. But priorities change, in life. And some of these young guys are blessed. They've got the sponsorship, the support, all of that stuff, and I think that's great. That just wasn't me. It
Yeah.
was, that wasn't the deck of cards I was dealt. And so getting out there and the therapeutic value of it, unplugging, going fishing, what's that saying? Teach a kid to fish and you can keep him out of trouble.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's really true.
Yep. For sure. A lot of, as I've gotten to know some co-anglers on the circuit and others over time, it often is the case that we all love the competition. That's one of the reasons we're there. I'm curious if you have a background when you were younger in athletics. Was that in part what led you to this?
No, I think just I think fishing when you really, put it under a microscope, fishing is such a primitive aspect of survival,
Sure.
right? You're a little kid or something, and say your first experience is throwing out a bobber, and that bobber starts to move, and you feel that. There's no feeling like having a fish bite the end of your line, and so that's kind of where it all started for me. Just we would hike the Auburn Ravine when we were little guy, 6, 7 years old, learning how to tie knots and catching fish and sneaking onto ponds and having guys shoot at us with rock salt or whatever, um, that kind of thing. But the actual fish catching part, there's nothing that can take the place of that. There's no drug that can do it. It's in catching a fish, a nice fish or whatever in a tournament during tournament competition. There's nothing like it. The feeling, I mean, I've often said, you want to watch a grown man cry, watch him win a bass tournament. And when they put the microphone in front of his face, it's just something special. The magic happens out there on the water. It's special. And I hope we can continue to do it for as long as we can. I got inspired. I drew a guy, I think he was 76 or 78 years old in the Shasta One Bass Open. And then, of course, Jigs Ben, he's mid 70s. So it gives me a lot of hope for the
Yep.
future.
Yep. For sure. For sure. Yeah, I hope we all get to do it for a long time.
Yeah.
Okay, last topic before trying to close. What I think I'll mention briefly one of the things that we're going to do when people sign up for the newsletter at Coanglers Garage. I've actually put a lot of effort into collating a bazillion ideas about what to do from the back of the boat when you're over 60 feet of water and the guy in front of the boat is scoping. And I don't have every idea under the sun. I'm sure there's some that some other guys have, and hopefully we'll uncover some of those over time in this podcast series. But we have put together a little guide that is going to be available to folks who show up or sign up for the newsletter. I wanted to ask you how that's changed for you over time. How has the advent of forward-facing sonar on the lakes we fish in the West changed the way you fish from the back of the boat?
Yeah, I mean,
Curious.
definitely, more guys are using it and learning how to use it. It's if you don't have it and you're not learning how to use it, you're behind in line for sure. These guys that are having success know how to use it. I fished with a lot of them, and uh, they're having success doing it. Um, so it puts you at a disadvantage. I've had it happen to me as a co-angler, and I don't um, I don't think there's a, a right answer for it. I think that's life. That's the way it goes. And if you're stuck back there, and that's, one thing I do know is because, if you can get the right position or something and be able to get a glimpse of them, and you can ask, hey, where are those fish swimming at or whatever. A lot of times the guys will turn off the back to save their battery, but I
Right.
think they just don't want you to see what's going on. Some guys will leave it on, and some guys will say, hey, go, feel free to change the screen or whatever. Because I like to look at it, just the regular down sonar, right? Um,
Yeah. Either having 2D or at the very least the contour lines on a map at least give you a
hmm
little bit of context.
Yeah, yeah. But I just keep casting, just keep casting because fish are around. Fish are really around everywhere. You just keep casting. You just don't. You just keep casting and casting, and if you get bit on something, keep casting that bait.
Yep.
You know. Um,
So for you, it sounds like trial and error and trying to develop a quote unquote pattern, which in this context, it's not quite a pattern, but and sometimes on those days, getting one bite is pretty
mhm.
important. Uh,
Yeah, because that's probably
it's a
gonna be the
clue.
bite that clues you in. Yeah.
Yep.
So little swim bait, throw it out, reel it in slow, let it hit the bottom. Anything you can do, in the deeper water, um, you know, throw a crankbait out there, a deeper crank. Who knows, right? Just start throwing baits till you get bit, um, and try to reach the bank. If you're anywhere near a point, throw as, most of these co-anglers are pretty savvy. They
Yep.
they can, figure a way. It's not their first rodeo,
Yep. Yep. For
Um,
sure. Okay. Well, super Troy. This has been a lot of fun from my vantage point. Really glad you joined us this morning, and I really want to thank you for being here. And I look forward to seeing you. Sounds like at the Delta and Boardman.
Yeah, really love to go to Boardman. It's on my calendar. It's just work. Depends
Yeah.
on how
Keep our
mine's all
fingers
based on
crossed.
housing sales and
Yeah.
stuff, so we'll see. But
Yeah.
yeah, definitely look forward to getting to know you a little bit and really and obviously enjoy what you're trying to do here because your talking points are, I mean, we could probably sit here and talk for another hour if we
For
could.
sure.
Because
Yeah.
I
And
love to
and we
fish.
probably
Love,
should sometime.
yeah. Oh yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I stay in touch with some guys, and we do talk fishing a lot. I was on the phone this morning with a guy who wanted to fish the front of the boat. Real good fisherman at the California Open here, one bass. but he's a little short on money. So he's like, Troy, I'm thinking of just fishing as a co-angler. And he's like, how do you set up your tackle box? So, because that's a big deal.
Yep.
He's got his own boat. I'm like, well, one box of terminal tackle, not, five,
Yeah.
and a mixture of these baits. And so I was kind of going over it with him. He's like, okay. I'm like, yeah, just go have fun.
Super. Well, that'd be a good topic for another day.
Yeah. Oh,
Perhaps
absolutely. We
down
could
the
talk
road a little bit.
forever,
Yep. No doubt. No doubt. So again, thank you very, very much. I'm super pleased that, you're going to be this is the second podcast, and hopefully, we'll be talking in a couple of years, and it'll be, there'll be many, many, many more.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll talk long before that. I'll see you at one of those upcoming events. So good luck in the Cal Open. I wish I was there. I love Clear Lake. Who doesn't? It's like bass fishing Disneyland.
Springtime, right?
Yeah, have a blast.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Have a great rest of the day, and thanks for joining us. You've been listening to the Coanglers Garage podcast, our second episode with Troy Mays. I hope you enjoyed it and learned as much from Troy as I did. At Coanglers Garage, I'm focused on building something to help us all become better tournament coanglers by learning from each other, giving coanglers a voice in the tournament community, and building community amongst coanglers. With that in mind, I hope you'll take a moment to hit like on this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel, and also check us out elsewhere on social media. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Coanglers Garage. That's it for now. Tight lines, and hope to see you at the next tournament.